So I've reviewed quite a few budget Motorola devices such as the G10 and the G30, so I thought I'd take a look at the G50. Now this is a budget 5G Motorola device, and going by the model numbers you would think it's a pretty substantial upgrade over the G10 or the G30, but is it? This is what I'm here to find out. So I'm a little bit late when it comes to reviewing the G50 as it was released all the way back in April, and I am slowly making my way through as many budget Motorola devices as I can. So let's start with the specs. So up front you get a 6.5 inch 720p display with a 90Hz refresh rate. Bezels around the phone are relatively thick, especially with this chin, but that's been the same on all budget Motorola's that I've tested. And up top you get a 13 megapixel selfie camera in this teardrop design, and this is the same 13 megapixel camera at f2.2 as you'll find on the Motorola G30. And as with other budget phones in general, the G50 is an all plastic phone, but it's not a unibody plastic like you find on the G10 and G30. This plastic frame is flat and reminds me of the Realme 8 5G, and the back has the same glossy back with a nice mirrored design. It looks a lot nicer in person, and I much prefer the look of the G50 over the G60S. And as with the G60S, the camera bump on the G50 is barely noticeable. On the top of the phone you have a microphone, and on the bottom you have another microphone, USB-C port and single firing speaker. And here is a quick sample from the speaker of the G50. Nice sort of shimmy effect. Of course it is still plastic. You've got your fingerprint sensor in the back there, and then your triple camera up. The G50 supports 15 watt charging, but unfortunately you only get a 10 watt charger supplied in the box. This means that you only get about 23% of charge in 30 minutes, which is very frustrating considering a lot of Xiaomi and Realme phones are supplying 30 watt chargers or more in the box. And this of course does mean that the phone does take around 2.5 hours to get from 0 to 100%, so that is quite a long time. Of course, if you're charging overnight, it's not going to be the end of the world, but if you're wanting to plug your phone in for a quick charge, you're not going to get that on this phone. Under the hood, you get a Snapdragon 480 5G processor built on an efficient 8nm fabrication, which will definitely be a factor in the phone's battery life, as well as the lower resolution screen. And going by benchmarks, the 480 inside the G50 is about on par with the Helio G95 in the G60S, but this is a slightly older chip built on an older 12nm process, and the G95 however will likely perform better in gaming as it is a gaming centric chip. And although the G50 has a 400 series processor, the phone does perform better in benchmarks than the G30, which has a Snapdragon 662. Performance for me has been absolutely fine. I had 0 stutters day to day, and light gaming was absolutely fine. The only thing I had was the same delay in processing images, which I found with every Motorola phone that I've used except the G60S yet. And lastly, let's talk about the camera. Now this is an area that people find controversial. The G50 has a triple camera system with a 48 megapixel main camera, but the other two cameras are just a 5 megapixel macro camera and a depth sensor. So there's no ultra wide camera on the G50, whether it was a way of keeping the cost down, and for me it's not the end of the world, but for those that like an ultra wide, you'll be better looking elsewhere. Photos from the 48 megapixel camera are to be expected from a budget Motorola phone, and this is the same hardware found in the G10, but image processing should be slightly improved with the Snapdragon 480 over the 460 found in the G10. And as with most Motorola phones, photos come out with true to life colour, no oversaturating, which is always nice, and of course they're binned down to 12 megapixels, which helps collecting more detail. The downside is noise does start to creep in when the light even slightly starts to drop or it's a dull day, and nighttime photography is to be expected at this price. Bright areas aren't handled very well, but night mode does a good job in controlling these areas, creating a more usable photo. The video from the main camera of the Motorola G50 tops out at 1080p at either 30 or 60 frames per second, as does the video from the selfie camera, again 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second. Let me know in the comments what you think of this video quality and the audio pickup from the Motorola G50. There are two configurations of the Motorola G50 to choose from. Both come with 4GB of RAM, and then you've got the option of either 64 or 128GB of internal storage. The model I have here has 64 gigabytes of internal storage, but of course both are expandable via micro SD. And as for software, you get a nice clean version of Android, and of course you've got Android 11 as the software. Whether you get Android 12 on the G50 only time will tell, but as you can see, you get a nice clean version of Android, which is found on every other Motorola phone that you can get. Pretty good, no bloatware or anything like that. The only unwanted app that you might have is just the Motorola's own app, which is basically just a shortcut to various things like changing the display settings and all that sort of stuff. So other than that, it's a very clean version of Android, one that I'm on board with all the way. So in a nutshell, that's my more in-depth look at the Motorola G50. All in all, it's a pretty good phone. I love the look of it. It's probably one of my favourite finishes on all of the Motorolas that I've used. The lack of an ultra wide, like I said, might be an issue for some people, but everything else I think is absolutely fine. The camera takes some nice photos. The stock Android experience is fine. The Snapdragon 480, don't be put off by the fact that it's a 400 series processor. If you're not a heavy user, this thing is absolutely fine getting through everything, and battery life is amazing. I charged it up yesterday. I've been using it as my full phone and I've still got 43%. So this should easily last me the end of today after taking it off charge at about 6:30 yesterday morning. So if you want something with great battery endurance and a really nice finish, the G50 is a good option. And of course, 5G. If there's any other Motorola budget devices you'd like me to have a look at, whether they're new or even older models, I have got an older model Motorola phone coming up in the next couple of weeks, so be sure to stick around for that. And again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.